Okay, and here we are back with part 2 of our lesson on how to draw on top of a reference file. So if you remember in video 1, if you just watched it, it's pretty easy to remember if it's been a few minutes. I brought in my image, I rotated the image so I'm sure that it's as close as it can be to kind of like straight and perpendicular to my drawing surface. I am still in an active sketch. I know that because the finish sketch button is here. And now I'm ready to start to draw on top of the object. Now, when I do this, you can zoom in and out, and I would encourage you to zoom in and out and use the pan feature to work through this so you can actually like zoom in to where you're going. I have to be okay if the line starts to deviate from perfectly perpendicular. You also want to think about areas where you can use the mirror command. So like this here is mirror of this, so I don't need to draw that twice. I would draw it once and then mirror about a line. So I'm going to kind of walk you through that process. Remember here the goal is to create a template that you can work from, whether it be laser cutter or not. So I do want to draw in the fold lines, which are internal to this geometry. And those want to be separate lines because if we're going to laser cut it, I want to pull those out and put those on a different layer so that they don't cut all the way through the material. So that's kind of my mindset in approaching this before I start. And now I'm going to go ahead and start. So I'm going to kind of figure out where I want to go. I'm going to invoke the line command here. And we will start maybe right here. And I am, whenever possible, now you can already see this line is going to deviate from that perpendicular. So I have to be okay with that because part of that is the parallax that happened when I took the image to begin with. And remember, these don't have to be necessarily perfect, so I'm going to go ahead and stop my line there. And I'm just going to grab this guy, hit escape. I'm going to move it over to kind of break it up in between there. And then I'm going to start the line command again from that point. I'm going to come up here, come over here. Here, if I zoom in, you can see these corners are a little bit rounded. I would just end that line, hold down my mouse button so I start to create that tangent arc. Pull over again here to this point, come down to there. Now I'm going to leave a little gap here so I have some space to fold my object over. And we'll get to that point, and I will use that tangent arc again to get to that point. So a lot of this is just creating this geometry kind of as quickly as you can. And here again, I'm deviating from that straight line. So what I'm going to do, just watch here for a second, I'm going to stop this line here, right? Because that's kind of, if I zoom in here, that's really where that tangent arc starts. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to zoom back out and I'm going to say, all right, this line down to here, all the way down to here, and maybe this line here, I want that to be identical on this side. So I'm going to drop in for myself a reference line. So I'm going to go back to my line command. I'm going to find that midpoint. I'm going to drop in a line. I'm going to make it a construction line. Again, so we're not going to pay attention to it as a solid geometry. And then what I'll do is I'll go to my mirror command and I'll select this guy and this guy and this guy and you and you and you, and I'll mirror it about this line here and click OK. So what that does is that assures me that this geometry is as close to the same as what is likely to be true. And maybe I could have grabbed this other line here as part of that mirror, but I didn't. So, you know, we can add that in here in a second. Then after I do that, I'm going to just pick up where I left off. So I'm going to come back to my line command, start here, and then watch what I'm going to do. Because I know that I want the depth of this tab to be the same as the depth over here, I'm going to hover over this. I didn't click, and I'm going to start to pull away, and you'll see that Fusion starts to track that line for me. Click, click, and then I can start to come up here and deal with this part. So I'm going to click here, come back to there. I'm using my scroll wheel and my pan as much as possible. Click and hold to create my tangent arc to that point. This would be a fold line, and so I'm going to come over here until where that tangent arc might start on this side. We're going to do that same mirror approach to go left to right, so that I'm sure that my geometry is equal. Here, this also is mirrored about that same vertical axis. So this, while this is a mirror of this half with these included should be mirrored over to this side. So I want to do less work, and I also want to have more precision, and so I can do both of those here. Again, I'm going to drop in a reference line, so I'm going to find the midpoint here, drop this guy down, create a reference line about that point. We'll make that a construction line here. It looks to me like this is off a little bit from the center of that, so watch what happens if I grab the end point of my line here. I can move that over, and that should invoke that point. You'll see I lost my tangency here, or maybe it was never there to begin with. So before I go any further, I'm going to create a tangency here between these two. Right. Oh, and that messed up some things. So all along here, you may have to go in and manipulate the drawing to go back to the way you want it. So that's the lovely thing about Fusion, is I can just sort of drag and drop things to make them work the way I want them to. Here, maybe I want to pull this up a little bit. Yep, so see how that's matching that curve a little bit better? This is now landed here. That'll allow this to all come over as I mirror. So here I'm going to drop a circle, and I probably actually want to use a 3-point circle, and I can go bang, bang, bang to create that circle. And you'll see here when I zoom in, there's actually this rounded curve. So I'm going to drop that same 3-point circle. I'll do another one of those here. Okay, and then I'm going to pull over a line. I want to make sure it hits my circle, so see that blue X. I'm going to come over and have it fall perpendicular to that point. I'm going to do the same thing here. Come over. And here you'll notice what I quickly did. Well, that might not be a good approach. Sure, it's a good approach. So what I'm going to do now is, you'll see I drew that line past that point. I haven't really covered the trim command, but it's here in the modify menu. So I'm going to click trim. I'm going to get rid of that point there. I'm going to get rid of that chunk of the circle there, that chunk of the circle there. So that gets me back to my halfway point. I'm going to get rid of this section of the circle there. Then I want to make sure that I have a tangency between this arc and this line. So that, again, is going to be just this guy, hold down shift, that guy, make him tangent, and then this guy and this guy, make those tangent as well. Again, they're all locked here. The only thing I have left is this little issue here. I could put in another arc, or we can still use the, under modify, the fillet command. So I'm going to invoke the fillet command. It's going to ask me to create a fillet between here and here, and I can push and pull that until that lines up right where I want it. That looks good, so I can hit enter to select that. So that gives me that geometry, which is going to allow me to mirror that over. Okay, so now that we have that, might as well just deal with that in a moment. So I don't want to mirror this line because it already exists. So I'm going to go to mirror, I'm going to select this guy and that one, and I'm going to do a crossing window and get all you guys. That looks good. mirror line. I'm going to mirror about this point and click OK. And that gives me the rest of this geometry and that line. That all looks lovely. I want to put all of this stuff that I've already done, including these lines, up here now as well. So that's just another mirror command. So go to mirror, select you, and I'll do a crossing window to select all of you guys, you and you. And I'm going to mirror about, I'm going to select that. I'm going to use this existing geometry. You'll see that positions all of that. This looks a little funny. Don't fret it, right? Because we know when I fold this, it's going to fold on that line. And because this is square and that's square, they're going to fall right on top of one another. So don't worry too much if this starts to deviate. And then all I have to do is connect these 2 points, right? So that finishes off that top section. That finishes off that section. And now I can go in and kind of finish working around my geometry by picking up where I left off. We'll leave there. We'll come down here. Again, we're starting to deviate. I'm not worried about it. It's just a little bit. I'm going to zoom in here to get this as best as I can. I'm going to bring over that. Oh, I did not like that. Hit escape. We'll delete that guy there. If you notice what I'm doing here, I'm going to come back in and add a fillet. So I'm going to let these lines cross a little bit long, and then I'm going to trim them. Zoom in there. Okay. And I'm going to trim. And actually, I'm not going to worry. Oh, whoops. Undo. I'm going to trim there. And it's so small, I'm not going to worry about anything there. Okay. Now I can finish this up. So I'll come back here, I'll zoom in here. Now this is one of those times that I know I want this fold line across the bottom here to be in line with this point. So I'm going to hover over here and I'm going to bring that across so that I'm sure that those guys will line up. And then I can zoom in and continue my little tour around the flap here. This is, again, I'm going to reference this point because I know I want these guys to be in line, so I'll carry that over, get that angle right, bring a line over to here, and we'll come down. Sometimes it's hard to figure out where you are in the grand scheme of things. There we go. And we're going to come over. Again, this height wants to be the same as this height, so it's already giving me that reference line. It's assuming I want to be there. Now, I also maybe want to think about how this point references with the one above it, which I haven't been doing a good job of. So we might want to go back in and add some vertical constraints between points before I get any further in that process. So you'll see that that is now giving me a tracking point from above. And we'll come over here and we'll just give this a little line to there. So that finishes off my overall geometry there. We'll zoom in here. And we can see, you know, hey, did I get everything? Looks pretty good. The only thing that I'm really missing is these straight lines across here and these vertical lines, and I'm not sure that these guys line up to one another. So one of the things I might start to do is start to connect things, right? So I know that when I fold my box, I want it to fold along this line. So that's easy. I can carry that line over here from the other side to that point. And while I'm here, I can do the same thing from here to here. So I'm drawing in all of the fold lines, and again, this is going to be critical if you're using the laser cutter to fold cardboard. Now, if you see what happened here, is this line vertical? I don't know if it is. So we're going to click on that line. We'll make it horizontal and vertical. And what that did is that pulled up everything to that same level, and that's how we can use the constraints efficiently to make things all work together. And I can do the same thing there. I can apply that that constraint to that point. Okay, I'll go back in and do the same on the horizontal lines here. So I'll grab this guy, bring him across to there. That guy, I want to create that horizontal constraint here. I didn't do it. Oops, I grabbed the wrong point. This is why it helps to zoom in sometimes. There, again, that's going uphill a little bit, so let's apply that vertical constraint. That pulls everything with it because all of those points are now tied together. This I also want to be horizontal, and then I can do this one more time from this point to this point. And we can make that horizontal and vertical. So that's how we keep all of these things kind of working together. And whenever possible, we want to start to create those constraints so that these things follow the kind of the rules that we want to set up for it. I have these lines that I want to drop between here and here and here and here and here and here. Before I do that, oops, I'm going to hit escape because I'm in the middle of a command. Before I do that, I'm going to come to my edit canvas here, and I'm going to turn my canvas opacity way down now, so I'm not dealing with trying to look at that as I'm drawing some of these other things. All right, so I'm going to create a line now from the midpoint. So I'm going to zoom in here. There it is. There's my midpoint. Down to the midpoint of this line. There it is. And when I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make, hopefully this doesn't mess everything up, I'm going to make this line a vertical line. And that should pull those midpoints over so that that stays in alignment with each other. I can do the same thing here between these 2 points. Again, this is a fold line so that my box folds together appropriately. Can find that midpoint by zooming in. Again, you can force the midpoint by holding down Shift when you're trying to find the midpoint. And we can zoom in here. There's my midpoint again. Hit escape. And we can click that line and create the vertical constraint to that. All of these things start to build off of one another. I'm going to find the midpoint line here. I'm going to bring that down because that's the middle of my fold point. I'm going to bring that down to this common point here. And I'm going to create a vertical constraint there. And we have one more to do here from this point to that point. And again, I'm going to create the vertical here. So that now provides all of the fold lines. Fusion's working hard. That provides all of the fold lines that I need to fold my box. It provides all of the outside cut lines that I need. And I've constrained all these lines appropriately so that I'm sure that this is going to cut out quite nicely. All based on that original image that we brought in. I can finish my sketch, and lo and behold, we now have that geometry. You can now go and put this on a drawing, print it out. Again, we can also laser cut, and we would take this sketch and we would create a DXF from this sketch to do a laser cut. And really quickly, last few seconds here, to do that, I'm going to go to my sketches. Sketch 1 is the one we just did. I would right click on that, and then I would click Save as DXF. That's the file we would use to start to laser cut from. Okay, so you would just save that file, and we would do some stuff to that to prep it for laser cutting. But that finishes off this tutorial about how to trace on top of an image, and again, trying to keep those constraints active as much as possible is what you want to do. All right, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you on the next lesson.